Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. We're going to investigate game theory a little. We're going to begin a dialogue with anybody who wants to talk about game theory. I'm an objectivist. I don't know advanced math. So if you think that game theory is valid, explain to me how, where, why, and what way it's useful, where we can use it, how it applies to reality. And here is the Sci Show, SCI Show, a pretty reputable thing, whatever reputable means. And they have a video called Game Theory, the Science of Decision Making. And I'm more and more suspicious the more I learn. Excuse me.
When you're hanging out with your friends, you probably don't think too hard about the math behind the decisions you're making. But there is a whole field of math and science that applies to social interactions. It's called game theory. Game theory was pioneered in the 1950s by mathematician John Nash, the guy that Russell Crowe played in A Beautiful Mind.
Alright, so it does come from a schizophrenic, alright? I'm just saying, guys. I'm just saying.
Isn't about games the way we normally think about them. Instead, a game is any interaction between multiple people in which each person's payoff is affected by the decisions made by others. So sure.
Pretty broad definition. I'm not sure if we took that as a definition. Not sure a game is any interaction between multiple people. Fine. So this is a group event in which each person's payoff is affected by the decisions made by others. Broadly speaking, that's any situation in reality. Those are pretty complex situations.
Is affected by the decisions made by others. So sure, that could apply to a game of poker.
Okay, poker. So can we distill that as an essence and learn anything from that as a concept? A concept of situations in which people's payout is affected by their contribution. Is that a concept? That's a game? Well, let's see. I just want to chew that concept for a second. Is this a concept? If we eliminate the measurements and we're left with just the essentials, right? Just the thing that all games have in common. All games have in common an interaction between people in which each person's payoff is affected by the decisions made by others. I don't know. I think there's a lot of gravy there, and we've been given a fork and a knife to eat our dinner and then presented with a bowl of gravy, I think. I don't know what's there. Okay, well, let's go forward and see if they can get anything for us to bite into, really? I mean, what is here? Okay. Alright, I'm gonna...
His payoff is affected by the decisions made by others. So sure, that could apply to a game of poker, but it could also apply to practically any situation where people get together and get up in each other's business. Like, did you interact with anyone today? Well, you can probably analyze the decisions you made using game theory. Game theory is incredibly wide-ranging, and it's used all the time by economists, political scientists, biologists, military tacticians, and psychologists, just to name a few. Game theory has two main branches, cooperative and non-cooperative.
This is where I'm going to get a little upset, because one of them is bizarre. And I wonder about the clearness of the whole system. First of all, I can't see where their definition of game is essential in any important... I can't see what's going on there. You have to have a context in which to define something, and this seems to be sort of in a vacuum. It's like, what are we related to here? Exactly what are we talking about? No, this is just theory, so and now this is really cooperative and non-cooperative. Okay, what are we learning here? What are we trying to learn? What are we trying to learn? Oh, we're not trying to learn anything. We just analyze and analyze and analyze and analyze, and then when we get done analyzing, we can go back and read it and read it and read it and read it, and maybe learn something. Is that how you do this? Is that what game theory is? Is just abstract analysis, even mathematicalized and abstract analysis of just floating concepts that have no particular relation to reality, and we're going to try to learn from manipulating these concepts that aren't related to reality in some way? Is that what it is?
Competitive game theory. Non-cooperative game theory covers competitive social interactions where there will be some
competitive social interactions where there will be some winners and some losers. Now, define competitive social interactions. In what sense is a social interaction competitive or not? What is a social? What do we mean social? What is an interaction? What do we mean by winner and what do we mean by losers? This seems like it's extremely loaded with assumptions. Very, very, very heavily laden with assumptions. I don't think this is a definition. I don't think that this is the essential of anything. I don't know. This is not anything. This is more gravy. This is like gravy on top of gravy. There's no substance.
Probably the
here.
most famous thought experiment in competitive game theory is the prisoner's dilemma.
All right, now if the prisoner's dilemma is an example of that last screen full of fluff and buried assumptions and undefined terms, the prisoner's dilemma is when two people have been dishonest scumbags and now are subject to the immediate and constant physical force of others, and they have to decide how to act in this situation. And what we can learn from that is just beyond me. And so if anybody who wants to can present me with any argument you want. I've watched this whole video already, so it's so garbagey, you're going to have to go watch this part of the video on your own. I'm now going to skip the prisoner's dilemma and the uncooperative side of game theory and look into it more in the future of some aspect of it maybe and see if I can see any substance in it. But from what I can see, it is heavily, heavily assumption-laden, floating nonsense. Okay? So, skipping now to 4 minutes and 20 seconds in the video to 4 minutes and 9 seconds, and then we'll go from there.
From stabbing each other in the back. The prisoner's dilemma is just one example of a competitive game.
From stabbing each other in the back. There, that's a good summary of what that first bit of nonsense was. How do we act rationally when we are both armed with a knife and we have to decide who to have... Yeah. Bleh.
The idea behind its solution applies to all kinds of situations. Generally, when you're competing with others, it makes sense to choose the course of action that benefits you the most, no matter what everyone else decides.
When you're competing with others, it makes sense to choose the course of action that benefits you the most. Now, I would just wonder, can we talk for a minute about what that means, to benefit you? Now, I can imagine a situation where I'm trying to buy land for a gas station, and the mayor is also trying to get the land for a dentist office he wants to start, and what do I do? Now, it just so happens, I believe that the land is very well suited for my gas station. It's in a fantastic spot. And I don't like the mayor. I think he's a jerk. And so I'm going to, really insist on getting that land because I know it's going to be good for my gas station? Nah, maybe I'm more crafty than that. Maybe I want the mayor to get that spot because I know that he's going to have a hard time getting the parking he needs or whatever. And, I just need enough room for 2 or 3 cars at my pumps, and they can get out of there. But he's got room for 2 or 3 cars now and a dentist office, right? So he goes through, spends the money, gets a dentist office, has to buy the spot next to it maybe and spend an extra bunch of money, or maybe it goes broke because it's so inconvenient, people hate going there. And so I revenge on him. And then I get the decrepit dentist office, or newly rebuilt, a nicely remodeled dentist office, and just install some gas pumps, and I outsmarted him. So did I outsmart him in game theory? What would I have done in game theory there? Would I have said, I'm not wasting that 2 or 3 years for him to spend going broke in his dentist office, I'm going to build my gas station first, so what would I do? Do whatever I could to maneuver to get the gas station built? You see? Pardon me, game theory just ignores the fact that this happens in a reality. Whatever the question of the game is, whatever the decision is. And I think that's where I'm having problems with it. You got all these terms that have a definition. It's like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Give me a situation and give me your values. Give me the situation the person's in, not just this definition of some abstract definition of the definition. Give me the actual concretes and tell me what the people in it believe. You know, if they're communists and they're not going to behave in certain ways and so on. Think about the selfish people in Seattle that voted for a $15 minimum wage and 40% of the restaurants shut down. How selfish were they? You know, what does game theory say about minimum wage? Well, it says we should pay people a decent wage. It says some of the most ridiculous stuff, if we can take this video to be any indication, which I don't know. Are these guys an authority or not? They seem pretty authoritative. They certainly speak like they're authoritative. Let's see.
Then there are cooperative games, where every player has agreed to work together toward a common goal.
All right, now this is the part that I'm trying to get us to. Cooperative games, where everybody has to work together towards a common goal. That's a little bit like society. Now I want to know what you mean. What do you mean? Every player has agreed. What does that mean? To work together. What does that mean? Toward a common. Does that mean we all benefit, or does that mean we're all stuck in the game? And goal. Does that mean it's something that all of us want, or does that just mean you've designed it as the end of this game that we're manipulated into deciding in? What do all those terms mean? You see, this is just looking more and more like floating nonsense. It's like, what can you, if you just define definitions about definitions, and they don't refer to anything now, you are just so out in the open. And then you just stand around manipulating those, and then you even invent math to manipulate them. And then at the end of the day, you publish it. What have you done? What have you done?
Agreed to work together toward a common goal. This could be anything from a group of friends deciding how to split up the cost to pay the bill.
How do you decide how to pay the cost of the bill? Well, that's easy, right? What did each person spend, right? Well, we all agree that, we know Joe didn't have a job, and we all invited him and told him to come. Now you all got to discuss who's paying for Joe. Are you all going to split Joe, $2-3 each? Or is Mike going to pay for Joe? Because Mike's the one who really invited him and said, does everybody agree? And everybody was like, yeah, Joe can come. How did this situation unfold? That's how we're going to need to know what are the people around the table commies? And they all believe in sharing everything equally? Or are they objectivists, and they don't care why Joe came and what kind of burger he ate? They're not paying for his burger. It's Joe's problem. Joe shouldn't have ordered a burger if he can't pay for it. What is our context? What is our context? Game theory seems to be a mathematical operation in context dropping. That's my current estimation of it.
To a coalition of nations deciding how to divvy up the burden of stopping climate change.
Now, I believe that they would try to apply game theory to how to divvy up the responsibility for climate change. They would probably spend hundreds of pages. I'll bet somebody has spent thousands of pages. I'll bet some government employee has spent thousands of pages analyzing the game theory of who should pay what for the climate change stuff that we all know isn't even real. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Why is my thing slowed down? This is bad. Don't do this. Hopefully it'll heal and come back. Okay.
Game theory, a coalition, is what you call a group of players in a cooperative game. When it comes to cooperative games, game theory's main question is how much each player should contribute to the coalition and how much they should benefit from it. In other words, it tries to determine what's fair. Where competitive game theory has the national...
Now, you're going to try to define fairness without reference to an actual situation in reality. All right? And analyze it, too. You're going to define what fair is. You just defined fairness. And now you're going to analyze fairness. And it's not related to a situation. And if you do bring up a situation, you only give a couple little details. Not the context, not the people involved, not their values, not what they're after. See? This is like floaty. This is bad.
Cooperative game theory has what's called the Shapley value. The Shapley value is a method of dividing up gains or costs among players according to the value of their individual contribution.
All right. So how does that actually happen in reality? And how would we model that in a game so that our theory reflected reality? Or do we not need to? Insofar as this happens in reality, Are you trying to get that? Are you trying to get a facsimile of that into your game theory here? If so, dividing up the gains or costs among players. How are you going to define the gains and the costs? Was it really a cost to me when that mayor got the dentist's office? Or was it the best I could get in that situation? What does game theory have to say about that? I doubt it. I doubt it. My hunch is that when you define things like the gains and costs, particularly in an actual situation, and the value of their individual contributions, when you identify that, my suspicion is that the things that there would be nothing left of your game theory once you got down to particulars. I don't think. I think that you're only able to manipulate some abstractions here. I don't see what it's doing, though. I don't see what good it's doing us.
It works by applying several axioms. Number one, the contribution of each player is
not axiom in the philosophical sense. Anarchists, this is an axiom in the sense you're using it. And you think you're using the philosophical sense. But anyway, this is just a definition that they say, here is the base of our theory. Okay. The contribution of each player is determined by what is gained or lost by removing them from the game. This is called their marginal contribution. Now, I am so tempted to point out that when John Galt was removed from the game collapsed, right? Because he was the driving motive force behind the game. So game theory might help us analyze the abstract events of Atlas Shrugged. That's probably the most useful thing you could do with game theory is literary analysis. I'll bet. Now then, the contribution of each player is determined by what was gained or lost by removing them from the game. Now, that definition or axiom is just for dealing with the theory here. That's not applicable to reality in any way at all. What's gained or lost by removing somebody from, what, a real estate deal or something? I mean, if you define it, this stuff falls to pieces here. If you actually put a concrete, but if you leave it floating, and that's how they have to do it, they have to leave all this stuff floating. All right, so far we've got, if you remove them from the game or versus having them in the game, what do they contribute? Well, what are the rules of the game here? What are we talking about? So this axiom's meaningless without a context.
By what is gained or lost by removing them from the game. This is called their marginal contribution. Let's say that every day this week you and your friends are baking cookies. When you get sick for a day, probably from eating too many cookies, the group produces 50 fewer cookies than they did on the days that you were there. So your marginal contribution to the coalition every day is 50 cookies.
So, there we give an example of marginal contribution. How much you produce when you go to work is your marginal contribution. But how did you do it, and what tools did you have available, and were you efficient at it, or do you not care about your job? No, we're leaving all that out, right? Well, does that have anything to do with decision-making and our values and how we act? Nope, we're not talking about that. We're just talking about decision theory, you know? It's like, okay. Anybody who, okay, I don't know. I just don't know what to say to it. It's garbage.
Interchangeable players have equal value. If two parties bring the same things to the coalition, they should have to contribute the same amount and should be rewarded for their contributions equally.
All right. If two players are equal, they should be rewarded equally. All right. That's just Platonic nonsense. Imagine two people who contribute equally at the workplace. But what do you mean by equally? How do you judge equally? You mean exactly perfectly equally? Or do you mean just generally they both do their job? Well, then they should be compensated equally. Well, one of them is more polite. One of them is so rude and he keeps doing that. We're just talking about decisions. We're just talking about people making decisions. We're not talking about how your values or your view of the world affects your decisions. We're just talking about decisions as such in a platonic, floating, abstract, non-concretized way. Except once in a while they concretize it with the cookies or something. It's like, well, why is that guy better at making cookies than the other guy? Blank out. We're just talking about the math of who gets what and who deserves how much. Well, what are we learning then? Really, what is it useful for?
two people order the same thing at the restaurant, they should pay the same amount of the bill. If two workers have the same skills, they should receive the same wages. Number 3, dummy players have zero value. In other words, if a member of the coalition contributes nothing, then they should receive nothing. This one's controversial. It could mean...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready? This is where I wonder if this is authoritative or reasonable or has anything to do with game theory. Does this guy have anything to do with game theory or what game theory actually is? Is he talking out of his butt here? All right? Listen to what he's about to say. If somebody doesn't contribute to the game, they shouldn't get rewarded. Right? Well, he's very upset that we might misunderstand that. He's really, really, really scared we might misunderstand the meaning of that. He's afraid we might think that that means that if somebody's not contributing to a situation, they should not be rewarded from that situation. The pot of goods in the middle of that situation should not be given any bit or share to somebody who's not contributing into that pot. He doesn't want us to think that that's what he means. That's not what he means. He doesn't mean that.
If you go to dinner with your friends, but you don't order anything, then you shouldn't have to chip in when the bill comes, which seems fair in that case. But it could also mean that if somebody can't contribute to the workforce, they shouldn't receive any compensation. The thing is, there are good reasons why somebody might not be able to contribute. Maybe they're on maternity leave, or they got in an accident, or they have some kind of disability. In situations like that, the coalition might want to pay something out to...
Now, is this official game theory? Is that official game theory doctrine? In a situation like that, the coalition might want to pay something out to them anyway? Is that official game theory doctrine, or is that utter retarded libtard nonsense? Or both? I choose C, both.
In spite of them not being able to contribute. The fourth axiom says that if a game...
Really? No, we're done with that. That was some junky thought. Okay, number 4. If a game has multiple parts, cost or payment should be decomposed across those parts. Okay? We would have to have an example of what that means. What the hell do you mean? If a game has multiple parts, what if the game is manufacturing coal from the ground? Cost or payment should be decomposed across those parts. Why? You would have to give me some example to know what you mean by that. What do you mean by cost? What do you mean by payment? What do you mean by decomposed? Just spread out? What do you mean by decomposed? Just spread out? And why? Why should it be decomposed across those parts? What does should mean? See? Lots and lots and lots of stuff going on there. What does all that mean? These are supposed to be the clear basis for thinking, not a confused mishmash of assumptions to start from. When you start from a list of 4 things, each of which has 19 assumptions inside of it, you aren't being particularly clear. Is this game theory? Can anybody who knows game theory tell me, is this game theory or not? Is this garbage here?
Parts, cost or payment should be decomposed across those parts. This just means that, for example, if you did a lot of work for the group on Monday, but you slacked off on Tuesday, your rewards on each day should be different. Or if you ordered a salad one night, but a steak the...
I wonder what these people would do if they explained objectivism to me. What kind of a racket mess would they make? Like, how bad is this explanation of game theory? Is this bad, or is this a reasonable explanation of it? And it's actually this garbage?
You probably should pay more on the second night. In other words, it's not always fair to use the same solution every time. The numbers should be reviewed regularly so that the coalition can make adjustments. If you find a way of dividing up costs or divvying up payment...
Is this theory, or is this advice on how to live our society? This sounds like ethical political advice, not abstract mathematical theory. He's like telling us about the welfare state and stuff here. This is strange. This is like bizarre.
To all of the players that satisfies all of those axioms, that's the Shapley value. The Shapley value can be expressed mathematically like this, which, yeah, is kind of complicated, but we can...
You jerks. Oh, 2 seconds.
Like this.
Uh-huh. That equals that. Well, you're lucky I don't know math, or I'd tear that to pieces. I'll guarantee I'd tear that to pieces. You're lucky I don't know math. or I'd tear apart the field of math that you're using.
Yeah, it's kind of complicated, but we can break down the concepts into something less mathy. So let's go back to looking at cookies. You're baking cookies, and your friend is baking cookies. In an hour, you can bake 10 cookies when you're working alone. Your friend, though, is like a cookie wizard, and in the same hour working alone, he can bake 20 cookies. When you decide to team up...
Like a cookie wizard. Drop the context. So what are we learning? If we drop the thing that matters out of the situation, because what really matters is why that guy can bake more guys than that. Because we're asking, how much do we pay, who gets paid and stuff. But why is he making more cookies than him? That's what really, really matters in this situation. You're just talking about how to divide up the pay properly, since this is the way this is just how they make. But why? Now, if it's the law that we have to pay them equal no matter how many cookies they make in an hour, then okay, well maybe that's a distraction. That's certainly a distraction. We can't possibly get more distracted than they are. They pass up the whole question of why this situation's occurring and just put that as one little detail with a forest of other details, and then they try to analyze the situation. What are you learning? Why is this useful? What is this applicable to?
Work together, you streamline your process. One person can mix up all the batter at once or whatever, which saves you a lot of time. So after an hour, you have 40 cookies. But
Now, if I can make 30 cookies alone, and you add an idiot to my process, do I make 40 cookies, or will I end up making 20 cookies because now I have to correct his shit, you know? Why is he only making 20 cookies an hour? Is it because he's stupid and slow and he's going to, like, mismax the batter or what, you know? What? You can't, I don't think you can drop the context and analyze this situation in abstract and get anything out of it. I don't think so. I can't see it. It doesn't make sense.
Been working alone, you'd only have made 30 cookies in the same hour. Then you sell each of those cookies for $1, and now you got $40.
Maybe I would make 40 cookies with his help. Maybe we could make 100 cookies if he would follow my directions and do it the way I tell him to, right? And I would say, all right, well, you pretty much can't do anything. You're pretty much incompetent, but just plop the dough onto the tray in little piles. Can you do that at least? Okay, I'll do everything else. I'll just bring the dough and the trays to you, and you sit there and plop the cookies down. Now, if I could get a worker who was so dumb that that's all he could do, but he could do that, I might be able to make 200 cookies an hour. Who knows? Who knows? Like, why is this guy only able to make 20? Why am I outpacing him making 30? Do we have the same tools? What's the difference between us? No, we're just going to analyze the theory of it. See? And this is not necessarily an attack on game theory unless I am attacking the substance of game theory here, in which case game theory is really garbage.
How do you divide up the loot? The Shapley value equation tells you to think about it like this. If you take the fact that you can make 10 cookies an hour and subtract them from the total, that gives your friend credit for the other 30 cookies. That's what happens when you remove your friend from the system. Their marginal contribution to you is 30 cookies. So if you take the fact that your friend can make 20 cookies an hour and subtract that from the total, that gives you credit for 20 cookies, because if you're...
I don't understand that, because I thought that I could make 30 cookies on my own and 40 cookies with him. I don't understand that. I missed something. I thought I could make 30 cookies on my own. Are they switching examples? That wouldn't surprise me.
You can make 20 cookies an hour and gives your friend credit for the other 30 cookies. That's what happens.
So by teaming up, so I went from making 30 cookies an hour alone to making 40 cookies an hour with my friend, such that my contribution is 10 cookies per hour? What did I not follow about that? What did I not follow?
In an hour, you can bake 10 cookies when you're working alone. Your friend, though, is like a cookie wizard. And
they did. They switched examples. Okay, we're using different numbers now. All right, so I'm going to try to pay attention to what happened. I can make 10 alone. My
While
friend's a
working alone, you
wizard.
can bake 20 cookies.
Why
When you
is he a
decide to team
wizard?
up, when you work together,
We don't know.
you streamline
Not worried
your
about
process.
that.
One person can mix up all the batter at once or whatever, which saves you a lot of time. So after an hour, you have 40 cookies. But if you'd each been working alone, you'd only have made 30 cookies in the same hour. Then you sell each of those cookies for $1. Now you got $40. How do you
Now, how did we get the 40 cookies? Why couldn't one of us do okay, some sort of synthesis? What sort of synthesis? Don't know. Not worried about that. But now we've got more money. See? How is this applicable to reality?
Loot. The Shapley value equation tells you to think about it like this. If you take the fact that you can make 10 cookies an hour and subtract them from the total, that gives your friend credit for the other 30 cookies. That's what happens when you remove your friend from the system. Their marginal contribution to you is 30 cookies. So if you take the fact that your friend can make 20 cookies an hour and subtract that from the total, that gives you credit for 20 cookies, because if you're removed from your friend's cookie-making system, your marginal contribution to them is...
My question is, who paid for the oven? Who paid for the cookie dough? Who paid for the pans? And who's paying for our labor? And who's buying the cookies? Now, if you tell me all that, then I'll know a lot about how to answer these questions. But I don't know jack all about how to answer these questions about who should get how much from what. From this here, I have no idea. No idea. You would have to define your terms. You have to tell me who bought what, paid for what, and who's expecting what, and why are they here, and who's buying the cookies. You'd have to add all that in, or else I cannot analyze who should make how much from what, and who gets what contribution and why.
Cookies. In the first case, your value to the coalition is only 10 cookies, but in the second case, your value to the coalition is 20 cookies. According to the Shapley dot...
So that just tells us that when we team up together, we can do more. Okay? In abstract, that's all we get from this. That when you team up, you can be more productive. We don't know how. Now, maybe by teaming up like I showed earlier, maybe I would just spend more time correcting him, and I would make less cookies than I can make alone. I've certainly been in situations like that. So, once you drop all the actual concretes of reality, you're not really left with anything. You've got to drop the concretes of reality from a unified group such that you're left with an essential at the end of the day. And when people say, what are you talking about? You can say, well, this essential refers to all these concretes. And they can look at all those concretes and see why they're similar into that essential. Like when you say chair, you don't mean a wooden thing. It could be plastic. It could be a beanbag. You say chair, you mean for an individual human to sit on. That's what you mean. And so when they say, well, what do you mean by that? You say, well, I mean beanbag. I mean a rolling chair. I mean... Right? And they can abstract from that your essence. Now, this is not a distillation of meaning from a group of concretes. This is a group of heavily, heavily assumption-laden garbage. Garbage.
Equation, you should average those two numbers together. 10 plus 20 is 30, divided by 2 is 15. So the Shapley value equation says that you should get $15 and your friend should get 25. This method can be scaled up to coalitions with hundreds of players by finding their marginal contribution.
My friend who was able to make... See? What? Who owned... Yeah. No, I'm trying to analyze that and say, would it be fair? And then I remember, oh yeah, wait. Like, who paid for the cookie dough? Who paid for the ovens? Are we each utterly equal in all that stuff? And who's buying the cookies? And how do we market the cookies? Are we each utterly equal in all that stuff? Like, if you drop all that stuff, what are we really learning here? What are we really doing here?
Every other player, and then calculating the average of all those numbers. Interactions can get much more complicated than the prisoner's dilemma or baking cookies, so there's a lot more to game theory. But it comes down to this. In a competitive situation, game theory can tell you how to be smart.
Can it? Or do you need to know more about the situation and the values of the people involved and your values? Or you can just use game theory to be smart. I don't know.
I don't know. Game theory can tell you how to be fair. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow, which was brought to you by our patrons on Patreon.
Oh my God, we never really got to anything substantive. Well, that's what... All right, ladies and gentlemen. There's my view of game theory, such as it is, I guess. That's my view of game theory at this moment. Do you have a video about game theory you think would, teach me, convince me, learn me? Is there something here I'm missing? Is this really the essence of game theory? Just tell me. say, Mr. Cropper, that video does tell you the essence of game theory. If you can't see what's going on in game theory, then you'd fill in the blank, whatever you want to say about me. Is that really the essence of game theory, guys?